Okay, John, we copy that.
This is Mission Control, Houston again.
Hey, good morning. KFC Launch Director Bob Seek is here to tell us what kind of a morning he and the launch team had. Bob?
Well, thank you, Dick, and we obviously had a super morning, and that was really followed by a good activity all the way through the count. As you recall, yesterday we scrubbed because of the situation with the transient leaks in both the liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen umbilicals, and we wanted to better understand that. So that was worked by the team during the day, and they performed an assessment from a load standpoint of essentially revisited the design characteristics of the umbilical plates and looked at those safety factors, and were comfortable with that. They also reviewed the data from previous tankings and the procedures that we used on this particular flow to build up the systems and mate the orbiter with the tank. And the review of all that supported the assessment that had been made that this was indeed a transient leak condition due to the thermal environment of the plates changing temperature during the first few minutes of the loading procedure. So based on that and the fact that we have launch commit criteria red lines to protect us from a safety standpoint of any hazardous accumulation of hydrogen or oxygen in the aft fuselage, we went ahead into the tanking and expected to see the transients again, particularly on the oxygen side, and we did, and they stabilized below the launch commit criteria limits, so they were well within spec. And the hydrogen one, we used a little different procedure and cold soaked it longer, and expected to not see any leakage there, and that's what we got, no leakage. So we went through a super smooth tanking and terminal count. We picked up no problem reports on either the flight or the ground system. It has to be characterized as one of the best yet. And the team was rewarded with a safe and successful launch this morning. As you know, we held a few minutes to get comfortable with the local weather and to have JSC make their final selection on a TAL site, since both Marone and Zaragoza, in fact, all three of them had been marginal through the night. So they wanted more time to assess that, so we spent an extra 10 to 15 minutes to get comfortable with the weather and picked up the count, and now the orbiter and the payload and the crew is on orbit and looking forward to a safe and successful mission.
You can take questions. Please, if you'd like. Your name and affiliation, please. Jim?
Jim Banky with Florida State. Bob, you explained, I think, with this thermal transient, what happened. Can you explain specifically why it happened on this configuration orbiter tank and why it hasn't happened in the past? And if you can't, will you, in the calm of whatever now ahead, convene any kind of little team to go after it and to explain it?
Well, the data analysis shows that it has happened in the past, not to the same degree, the same amplitude that we saw this time, but the signature, as it were, when you really look at the data with the magnifying glass, has been there before on a number of the missions. And that was what supported, of course, the analysis and the conclusion that we made.
So the issue is closed and there's nothing you need to do now?
There's nothing else in the way of procedures to be changed or revised, other than possibly in the front end of our tanking, we'll revisit the chill down, as it were, of the plates, and that will be looked at.
Beth?
Beth Dickey with Reuters. Bob, what do you know about the underspeed that's going to make an extra on-spur necessary?
If it's a flight parameter, I'm not aware of it. I haven't been tracking the mission since ETSEP.
Harry?
Harry Colcom, Aviation Week. Bob, how, in the procedure for extending the cold soak forward, are you going to continue to do that now? Will that be part of the procedure?
Well, something like that probably will be. We may, this morning we staggered the tanking start, and actually, if you recall, the hydrogen usually runs ahead of the oxygen. what we did this time was started the oxygen first and kept the hydrogen in a slow fill, which allowed a better chill down of the plates on the hydrogen side. And we saw the transient on the oxygen, didn't on the hydrogen for that reason. We're going to look at the front end, as it were, for the loading of both of those. And not saying we'll change anything next time, but we'll certainly take a hard look at it.
10 more minutes with a cold soak before you start.
Well, that could be one of the options. We may do that.
Shirish?
Shrish Dante with the Rhino Sentinel. Bob, to follow up on Jim's question then, when you say that you've seen these spikes in previous flights, however, not to this amplitude, can you try to quantify that? I mean, just how much more was it this time? Was it 50% more, 100% more, or what?
Well, the amplitude of the spike, as it were, probably 100% more than on the previous maximum. But the stabilization, once everything got essentially a unified temperature, was pretty close to within the family, maybe 10% higher.
Is it possible then that it has to do with the wear of the parts involved over a certain number of cycles?
Well, it's probably more due to the tolerances of the hardware when the two mate together. And that's one of the things that was looked at hard today, actually doing the revisiting, as it were, the acceptance test procedures for the plates that were on the tank and the orbiter for this particular mission. And you can see variations in those tolerances which support the fact that some will take longer to seal at cryo temperatures than others.
We'll take one more question here before we go to NASA headquarters. Greg?
Craig Cavald, Aviation Week. Did you use the day of launch I-load change?
We did use the dolly-loo term, as it were, and to get around the winds aloft situation, which was much more severe yesterday than today. But we were in spec with all the parameters with what we call a yaw positive update to the computers.
If you hadn't used the dolly-loo, would you have been able to fly today, or was that critical to flying today?
Well, once we got it within spec, we would have to get you the data on that, because I'm not sure. Then we didn't run another load after we went with the dolly-loo option. We may have, if we'd not had dolly-loo, had to have taken another Ray-1 because it was changing to see if one of the standard I-loads would have got us. We'll have to run the data for you on that.
Do we have a question at NASA headquarters?
Yes, we do. This is A.R. Hogan with Astro Magazine, Rose Plus Newsroom. A couple of questions for Mr. Seek, please. Just a point of clarification, some of the press accounts are calling this the first shuttle launch of the mission to planet Earth, but yours was really, although designed before Mission to Planet Earth was conceived, was billed as the first Mission to Planet Earth shuttle flight back in September of '91, as I recall. Can you clarify that point? And I have an unrelated follow-up question, please.
Well, I'll probably have to defer to the Public Affairs Office.
Is that a launch-related question? I think you have some people at NASA headquarters who can handle your question about the missions to the planet Earth. Do you have any questions that are launch-related?
Well, yes, actually. This is more of a philosophical question, but do you have any read on the lack of interest in this particular mission? I've been surprised with the intense interest in the environment that this mission has gotten very little play, and obviously you have a smaller press corps there than you know, in many cases in the past, from what I understand. Any read on why there hasn't been a tremendous interest in this flight with the recent ozone hole in the Northern Hemisphere findings? I mean, the people are getting the message we can learn lots about the environment from space.
Well, I would only reply by saying that the interest is usually proportional to the amount of interest that the media takes in what we're doing, and I've seen that interest to be the same, if not greater than previous.
Mr. Hogan, I'd like to add that we have far in excess of 400 news media here for lunch today.
Thank you. That is the last question from Washington. Thanks.
Do you have any additional questions, headquarters? No. Okay. Phil?
Phil John Earth News. Bob, this is your first launch with the reduced budget cuts and everything, how much more difficult has it been with the 5% budget cut, and do you see any problems for the rest of the year?
In terms of processing, there's the degree of difficulty has not been increased, as it were, due to the budget cuts and what's projected there in the future. A forcing function from that, of course, is to find ways to do things more efficiently, and our motto is, however good we are, we're going to have to do better, and we're motivated to do that. And the progress that we've made in processing, particularly the team here at KSC, reflects that. Our turnaround times are reducing, stacking times for SRB. All the preparation activity is more efficient because we're working less on weekend and we're working less overtime, and all of that saves money. And still meeting the schedules with a quality product. So the reductions, as it were, have not had an impact yet, and we don't foresee that they will unless they get to the point where we have to stretch out schedules because of lack of resources. But at this point, we're happy with the performance of the team, and the quality of the product that they have produced speaks for itself.
So given the three-way equation of number of people, overtime, and the schedule is the one that'll suffer if you don't have enough resources.
That's what would take the hit, and we should know well in advance when that's coming and can adjust the schedules and the manifest if it has to be accordingly.
Todd.
Todd Halverson, Florida today. Bob, I wanted to try to follow Jim and Sharice's questions back to the tanking on Monday night. I'm wondering, when you went over the tanking data from the previous flights, did you notice anything different in the procedures? Was there anything different in the way that tanking was carried out that might have caused those spikes?
The procedure's essentially the same. We've stabilized those, as it were, with the software and have put in time constants for the various phases of chill down, slow fill, fast fill, and the criteria for that transition. The thing that's different is that for some of the vehicles, based on the performance of these two plates in their mating, we've seen different concentrations of oxygen and hydrogen in the aft fuselage. And discounting when we had the major leaks with the umbilicals, there's been a number of them that had a similar signature, just not the same amplitude.
John Noble Wilford.
John Wilford, New York Times. You have a new space shuttle in the process now. Are you doing anything different this time than you did the 4 previous times to get it ready?
In the preparation of Endeavour, no, the procedures are the same with the exception of there are additional tests because it's a first flow vehicle, as we call it. And of course, that's what makes the processing longer. And the major additional new test is the flight readiness firing, which we're preparing
Yes,
for.
but you had that on first flights for all your vehicles.
Right.
Is there anything different? Have you learned something from those 4 first flights that enable you to speed up or vary the processing?
Not because it's a new vehicle, other than the generic, the improved efficiency due to all the enhancements we're doing in processing. That's the only change.
Rod.
Boss Cabot, Channel 9. Bob, is the 17-inch disconnect, the plates and the seals, is that the same on the Endeavour or different, or isn't that being redesigned?
The design of the plates are essentially the same. There are some spacers in there which are a little bit different on Endeavour, but that's a hardware longevity turnaround enhancement as opposed to a redesign of the plates. But they functionally look exactly the same.
Jim Banky.
To follow up, Bob, now that you've launched Atlantis, how quickly will you be able to solidify your schedules for FRF and launch of Endeavour?
Well, we're doing that today, as a matter of fact, and we hope to, by the end of the week, have the no kidding, as it were, date for flight readiness firing and the process after that to get to launch. But it's still going to be around the first week in April for the FRF and about a month later for the launch target.
Dan, you want to be cleanup man?
Sure. Dan Billow, WESH-TV. Bob, we used to talk quite a bit about how the launch team was kind of getting better and better as it went through countdown after countdown. Is that still true, or has it reached a plateau? Is there getting more and more efficient?
Well, there's always room for improvement, and the one thing about a launch like today's that maybe make you a little nervous as a launch manager is that it really had no training value because there were no problems to work. So we'll continue to have our simulations and exercise the team for the kind of failures that they can expect and for the kind that they can't expect. And that's how we really grade ourselves.
And with that, we'll close this news conference. Thank you very much.
Okay, copy. Go for payload bay door opening.